Welcome back to Today's Game Changers podcast, guys. Today I have Joshua Blatman with me, who is actually going to start an Acton Academy quite soon. So I'm very excited to have this conversation about that. What's up, Joshua? How you doing today?
What's up, Zach? Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing phenomenal, Mel. This morning I went for a cold plunge with my son and a 2-mile run with him. And it's
Whoa,
quite
how old is he?
actually, he's 9. He's
Cool.
9.
2 miles is a lot for a 9-year-old.
I know, I didn't think of that, right? I thought like it's nothing, but we started yesterday with him. And I didn't realize that 2 miles actually is quite a lot for a young boy like that. But, he persevered, he powered through, and we actually did 7 sprints in those 2 miles as well. But it just goes to show how much opportunity is out there for kids to actually, we don't trust them enough to do difficult things. We think they're kids, but when you put them to the test, they show so much resiliency and grit, and they actually dig deep and they find that with them. And I'm excited to talk about Acton a lot today, because I promise you, if there was an Acton near me, my son would be attending today. I'm unschooling my kids, but it's only because there's no good options, and I'm forced to unschool, not by choice, but by necessity. So let's talk a little bit about how you came to learn about Acton, because I'm very curious to find out, how did you find out about Acton? And I'll tell you, the way I found out about Acton is when we embraced entrepreneurship for kids. We found them through that, because they facilitate, they help parents like me become organizers of children's business events. So we did that, and through that journey, I discovered their curriculum, I discovered what they're about. At that moment, that was 2 years ago, there was only a few dozen of them. Now, you told me on your last meeting with them, there's already 300 locations and scheduled to be close to 1,000 soon, which is mind-blowing. I'm super excited about the growth of Acton, the fact that it's actually happening. The education revolution is underway, and you're part of that. So I want to talk more about that, and then we'll also dive in a little bit deeper about your personal journey and your passion for astrology and your Substack that you do. Some
Cool.
fun stuff.
Yeah, it's all fun stuff. Thanks for laying out the premise. So you've actually known about Acton longer than I have, believe it or not. And just for a little context for everybody else, I met Zach through Twitter, and we're just kind of chatting back and forth, and he made a comment and about education, and we bantered back and forth a little bit, and he mentioned the Children's Business Fair, and I was like, oh wait, you know something about this, let's like talk about this and dive into it a little bit deeper. And so, as you said, you've been aware of Acton for a couple of years. I've been aware of Acton for less than a year.
Talk about taking action. I love it.
I totally did. I have a teaching degree. The long story is, teaching degree, graduated college 2007, didn't want to go into the classroom, went around the world a little bit, ended up moving to Seattle. I substitute taught and taught private music lessons for a long time out in Seattle, and moved back to the Midwest in 2021, and was like, okay, world, okay, universe, if you want me to teach, I'll go teach. Fine, we'll just go do this. And my teaching degree is from Ohio, so like the licensure stuff wasn't all that complicated, but I got into it. I got back in through substitute teaching, and the way it works now. So when I substitute taught the year after I graduated college, you went through you called the district itself, and you were an employee of the district as a substitute teacher. Now, the way it works is, you're not an employee of the school district, you're an employee of a subbing solutions company. So it's basically like an outsourced HR department. It's basically a temp. I think of it like, and I relate it to people as though it's more of like a temp agency that's offering job placement services to various companies, AKA schools, school districts. And so I got appointed, I got an appointment through this subbing solutions company, AKA temp agency. And the school districts put their jobs up onto a platform. The teacher like pushes their, I'm not working today, I'm sick, whatever. I'm pushing it up onto a platform, up onto the server, and that server directly connects to the subbing solutions company. The subs go up onto the server for the sub solutions company and pick jobs that they want. So basically I was waking up at 5, 6 in the morning and just picking the jobs that I want at a variety of different school districts that this sub solutions company works for. So it's like a much, in theory, it's seamless. In practice, because I don't work for the school district, there's not the same rules and regulations about employment things, kind of the way that Facebook was able to say, well, no, we're not harvesting your data. Oh, we're just buying it from the company that is harvesting your data, right? So like there's that intermediary middleman business. And so I was working in 5 different school districts, and there were challenges. I noticed that kids were asking me questions like, do I have to have my screen brightness up all the way? It hurts my eyes. One kid, 6th grader, specifically asked me that. I have to have my screen brightness turned up all the way. Why? And I'm like, I don't care. I just want you to get, I want you to feel comfortable getting your work done. And he was like, oh, because the teacher says I have to have my screen brightness up all the way. And I'm like, why? She's like, probably so that she can walk by and see what he's doing. And it's like training children into a surveillance state that I'm just like, huh? Is this what education is? Is this what education is supposed to be? This is what education is, but is this what learning is? And so like learning versus education, and like teasing apart distinctions and entanglements. And I started to think to myself, like, there's got to be what's coming to mind is other stories of like, a teacher leaving a lesson plan for the students to watch High School Musical 3 in music class when he was out, and High School Musical 3 isn't over. It's just not even appropriate for school. Like, if we want to be professionals, if we want to be taken professionally, if we want to be taken seriously, we can't, like, kids can watch that movie on the weekend or after school or whatever, but like, it's not a movie that's appropriate in any kind of a professional setting. And like it, over dramatizes all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like, why are we watching this? And there's a number of stories. Like a more concerning movie was The Adventures of Tintin in a French class that's only loosely based on French culture. It had a number of troubling themes, like a character who's supposed to be, I think Tintin is supposed to be in high school, or he's supposed to be like a very like a old teenager, but he's having to run the story, and he's like almost like a MacGyver kind of character, which totally dates me, I guess. Like, kids don't know who MacGyver is, but he was a guy who could, it was a show in the 80s where this character MacGyver could solve problems with ingenuity based on the things that are around him. And it was really clever, and he was like heroic for sure. And I'm watching this movie Tintin, where this older teenager is having to he's having to do all these things that like aren't realistic. And he's also having to take care of the captain, who was basically an alcoholic and was drinking the whole cartoon movie through. And this teenager is having to tell this adult, stop drinking, put the bottle down. We've got to go run away from these guys who are trying to kill us. And I'm like, oh my God. And I wrote down 7 things that were problematic with this movie, and the things that they shouldn't be showing to kids in a junior high class, whether it's French or not French. They got away with it. It was on the lesson plan because it was in the realm of acceptable because it was about French culture. And so that's about French class, even though the teacher's instructions for me to play it in French didn't work. And so like, I'm like playing this movie in English because like, I don't know what, like, I don't know how to use your machines. Like, so, um,
And
so
it's
I wrote the administration, here are 7 reasons why this movie is a problem and shouldn't be shown in junior high. Like, what are you doing? And so I start, maybe I'm a squeaky wheel in a well-oiled machine.
it is a well-oiled
And
machine.
it's a well-oiled machine for sure. Just
Absolutely.
lockstep, pump them
And the goal
through.
of it is not to educate. That's what most people are missing. Well, I think they're waking up to it now. The goal for it is definitely not to educate. It's actually to create consumers, it create employees, and it works quite well. If you look at the results of our education system, it does what it's intended to
Ed,
do quite well.
it does what it's in, yeah, educate versus indoctrinate
Absolutely,
into
man.
the
And
consumerism culture. Yeah.
the thing is, the future is going to be very merciless to the products of the society. It's the reason why I pulled my kid out of schools. And the thing is, what other I have friends that can afford private schooling, and what they don't understand, and I've been trying to convey to them, is that private schools are a little bit better, but at the end of the day, the end result will be the same because the approach is the same. When my son was going to bases, like I mentioned to you before, during the orientation, when they were like trying to get us to choose that school, you go to these orientations when you choose a private school. They were talking about growth mindset, everything revolves around growth mindset, and I took them at their word. And then the blessing in disguise to me was COVID, when everything shut down and they moved into remote learning. But I got a chance to look at their curriculum and how they actually educate and how they evaluate students. And I realized that everything they're doing is against the idea of a growth mindset, simply because they're still rewarding for knowing the right answers. All they should be rewarding for is effort and progress, individual effort and progress, as compared to your personal benchmarks. And they're still segregating kids by age, which I actually knew, but it didn't register at the time. So they're making all the same mistakes as a fixed mindset education does, and they call it a growth mindset in theory, but not in practice. And that's when I realized it is one thing to preach that you're fostering growth mindset. It's a whole different idea to actually create it. And one of the things that when I discovered Acton, when I've listened to Jeff talk about and listened to the videos they put out on YouTube about what they do, and they're actually embracing the growth mindset in kids and the way they help kids collaborate with each other, and the hero's journey that they put kids on, and to overcome difficulties and actually not grade them based on how well they know a subject, but rather evaluate them based on the effort they put in and the progress they've made. Those are the things that greatness is made of, man. And that's why I like Acton a lot. The only thing I would add, and remember that banter between me and you back and forth on X used to be Twitter, that I said it's close to ideal. And the reason why I
Yeah.
say it's close to ideal, because like there's a lot of research, for instance, that shows how mindfulness, how meditation improves kids' focus, concentration, lowers anxiety, right? So like I would definitely include that into every day, spend 5-10 minutes meditating as a group, because believe it or not, actually meditating as a group is much more powerful because our frequencies line up and it's much more deeper experience. I do transcendental meditation. So every once in a while, there is a transcendental meditation day. That day, every person who does transcendental meditation meditates at the same time. And when I do it at that time, I feel it. It's not a joke. I feel like it's such a deeper experience. And they explain it the fact that everybody's doing it at once, so our frequencies line up. Because we do know that brains emit frequencies, whether it's beta, theta, or gamma waves, right? We can't see it, so it's hard to
Coherence.
understand it, but it's there. We can measure it with physical devices. So meditation is something I would definitely include into a school day at Acton, as well as exercise, because an enhanced neurobiology creates so much. It's 2 reasons. One is you learn much better, but 2, I want to make that a habit, a habitual thing from early childhood. It's very hard for me as an adult to get into daily exercise. I have to overcome things. But with my kid, if I do it with him from an early age and it becomes a habit, he's going to carry that on for the rest of his life. It's going to be easy for him, habitual. So developing habits is prime to me in schools, because schools take so much of their time, and also parents just don't have the opportunity. Parents who have to go to work, who have to rely on schools to help them develop these habits, whether it's reading, whether it's meditation, whether it's exercise. So starting the day with that, or at least incorporating it throughout the day, would be a huge plus to the kids. And I think Acton, because the way it's structured, it's amazing that you, as the owner of your own Acton Academy, can shape and mold the curriculum the way you see fit. That's awesome. That's really, you can bring your own touch to it now.
That's
So
it's a primary it's one of the things my wife and I have been really talking about making sure we bring to the Acton Academy that we're opening next year in Cincinnati. This idea of mindfulness, we want to bring mindfulness practices to kids and normalize it. I want mindfulness to be more comfortable than cartoons.
it would be phenomenal for them.
It would be it's a life skill. It's rather than a escape habit.
It really is. You know what blew my mind is when Ray Dalio published his first book, Principles, which is one of my top 5 books. And Ray Dalio is a self-made billionaire who built Bridgewater Associates from zero to a multi-hundred-billion hedge fund. He published his book, and he was doing his book tour, promoting his book. One of the interviews he did was with Rob Roth. His nickname is Meditation Bob. And he was telling him this blew my mind. He said, the number one secret to my success is transcendental meditation. I was listening to it and I was expecting some kind of a genius answer. I was thinking some kind of like, here's what it is, like radical transparency, stuff from his book, something that I haven't heard before. And then he goes, the biggest secret to my success is transcendental meditation, because it allowed me to be non-reactive to world events. It allowed me to take it in, not react, and just pause for a second and process it. When everybody is reacting, I'm like, all right, it is what it is. It's happening. Let's just deal with it. And then I learned there are a lot of other super successful people that actually embrace meditation as part of the daily routine, like Jerry Seinfeld, for instance, does transcendental meditation every day. So you learn about these people. You're like, wow, there's something to it. And I started doing it, and it transformed how I actually react to things, and actually made me a much better parent, because in a process of meditation, you build a lot of patience. And patience is something any parent could use more of, because kids will test you, they will trigger you, and how you react to it is going to be fundamental to how they see the world. So meditation to me just made me a better parent. And I can't, recommend, if I had to recommend one thing to every parent, it would probably be exercise, number one, and second would be meditation.
I think meditation is I think meditation is the yin of exercise, yang. So like, yeah, like exercise is the yang. It's the go out and get it, go out and move that weight, go run that extra 300 yards. Whereas meditation is the softening and lengthening and stretching and expanding. That's not about effort, but it's about relaxing into and opening more deeply, which is the end. Yeah.
And I think there's certain things that happen during meditation actually quite transformational. I'll tell you, as somebody who is nowadays a huge believer in psychedelics, and we'll talk about your journey with that as well, because you've had a traumatic experience in your life. You actually got T-boned in a car accident, right? And ended up in a coma, and I had PTSD to deal with afterwards. For me, psychedelics helped me discover myself, rediscover myself. What I'm doing today, if you've told me 5 years ago that's what I'd be doing, I think you're crazy out of your mind. I was downtown Manhattan running multiple businesses, building an empire. And today I'm trying to bring entrepreneurship to kids, which is...
Can I grab onto something that we were talking about a minute ago?
Yeah, please.
You're doing TM, call it whatever you want. It's quietness and inwardly exploring rather than outwardly interacting, right? And so I wonder, in all the benefits that you've talked about, what has I imagine 2 questions. Do you have a more like, how has your physical complexion changed? Like, does your face look more alive? And do you look less wrinkly? Do you look less tired? And secondarily, what does your wife say? What are the people who are closest to you, who deal with you, interact with you most often? What changes do they acknowledge about you since you've been doing the TM?
Well, mostly is the way I react to things. I used to be a very trigger happy guy. You know, I
Mm.
was very emotional, reactional, and a lot of that was very negative. And when my kids were born and I went through the journey of transformation myself, it was my biggest challenge is not to react. And so TM helped me a lot by to not react immediately to the triggers that they set out to me. As far as my physical thing is, I think lowered stress definitely helped me become healthier. I weigh a lot less today. And I've done crazy workouts regimens before where I couldn't lose weight. And that had to do with the fact that I was in a very stressful environment all the time. So stress kind of kills testosterone levels in men. And when I started meditating, my T's went up a lot simply because my stress levels got reduced. So that helped me a lot with that. I also had a couple of psychedelic experiences when I was doing TM twice a day. I'm struggling to do it twice a day to this day. It's not easy to find 20 minutes twice a day to do it. But during the pandemic, when I was completely shut out from the world, I was doing it twice a day. And I had very similar experiences to the ones that I would have in psilocybin. Where I was actually, there was one experience that was so fundamental to me, where I recalled memories of myself when I was like 8, 9 years old that I had no memory of. And I literally was like crying for an hour afterwards. And it was very emotionally healing, that process. Yeah. I totally forgot about this traumatic experience of my childhood. My brain probably blocked it out because it was so traumatic. So I relived it about maybe a few weeks into doing TM twice a day. And it was very uplifting, like a rock fell off my shoulders after I remembered what happened. So
So you're having a hard time finding 20 minutes twice a day. I
that's an excuse,
throw
though. I
out,
always find that as an excuse. I have to find the time. It's
because
always an
think about it
excuse.
this way. Think about it this way. Remember, the days are long, but the years are short, right? So if you get, it's 40 minutes, even if you did 15 minutes twice a day, 30 minutes a day, you get that in twice a day. Even if you did 10 minutes twice a day, it would still give you a lot of value. I think
The thing about TM, though,
the
is the last 5 minutes are the most powerful. So that's Tim Ferriss
oh
actually broke it down for me why that is, because the first 10 minutes we're trying to calm our brain down. The third
yeah
5 minutes is like you're getting into that because they measure the gamma
yeah
waves and the
deep
beta
work.
waves.
Oh, this
Yeah,
is
the
really
deep
important.
work.
Yeah,
So the
yeah,
last 5 minutes is where the magic actually happens. So doing
yeah.
it 15 minutes twice a day is not nearly as powerful as doing it at least one time for the 20 minutes. So sometimes I go
All right,
longer than 20
I
minutes.
buy that. Yeah,
So because it's the last 5 minutes that make the big difference when you get into that, whatever the waves are,
totally.
whether it's gamma waves, I think you get into the last 5 minutes, one of those brain waves
Yeah.
states. So I'll find the
So
time, though. I always think that people who tell me I don't have time is just like, okay, I have the same bullshit excuse like you. And then you just get up
yeah,
earlier and you don't watch TV as much at night and you go to sleep earlier. You'll find the time. The thing with
yeah,
TM is you shouldn't do it too close to sleep because it won't let you fall asleep easily. And then the struggle for me is like to find the time at 5, 6 o'clock because I take my son to hockey practice every other day. Because I spend so much time with kids, it's like it's hard to do, like, all right, I gotta go in the quiet mode, and then they won't let you be in the quiet mode. They just run into the room. My daughter's only 4. She doesn't understand what it means to leave me alone. To her, it's like, what do you mean leave me alone? I'm the biggest gift since you have in your life. I'm here. So it's okay. I'll find the time. I definitely will. It's the goal of my object on my list, because also the TM instructors that I worked with and I still keep in contact with, they keep repeating to me that doing TM twice a day quadruples the impact. And that's what I felt.
yeah. That's what I was trying to get to when I was talking about the minutes. Like I don't practice TM specifically, which I think kind of shows in the way I was reflecting about the minutes. But the years are short and the days are long notion was directed at the idea that the more mindful you are, the more coherent you are, the more work you fit into a smaller amount of time.
Interesting. Not sure how that relates to
Yeah.
TM in particular, because the benefits again come from the last 5 minutes. You have to get that waves,
Yeah.
that state of waves going. But we'll
I'm
get
saying we're
there
saying the
one
same
step at a
thing. Yeah.
time.
It you could tell yourself that I'm going to work hard for 23 hours a day, but you really only get 5 hours of work done because you're stressed out. If you do your 40 minutes, whatever the protocol is for TM, you might only do 10 hours of work a day, but you get 8 hours of actual work done. That's what I'm,
Absolutely. I used to work so many
that's
hours
what
in
I'm
my
saying.
office, and most of it was a
Yeah.
waste. I would take Adderall, pop them like Skittles, and just stay hyper focused. But in reality, today I can achieve similar type of focus using, like right now, I'm on ketosis. I fasted for 3 days last
Mm,
week in order to get into ketosis. Ketosis is a bitch to maintain because you can't eat almost anything, but it is super beneficial for mindfulness in terms of like clarity of mind. It is
mhm.
absolutely mind blowing how different your brain works once you're running on ketones versus glucose.
Right.
So
Living on fat rather than sugar.
yeah, because brain actually operates on fat, I believe. But either way, like ketones is just so
Hmm.
empowering, very hard to stay in. So right now is
Hmm.
sober October month. So I'm leveraging that because I used to I'm like a social drinker. Every other day I'll have a glass of 2 or 3 of wine. And so this opportunity for me, I'm like, all right, I'm going to combine the two. Sober October challenge. Since I'm not going to be drinking, I might as well try ketosis because that was always a challenge for me. How do I stay in ketosis if I want to have a glass of wine? It knocks you right out, and then getting back into it, there's this danger of keto flu. Keto flu is the worst thing you can experience because you're not producing
Mm,
ketones yet and you have no glucose already. So you're just like brain dead, huge brain fog.
mm.
And it's very, very, it's tough to think. So it's just easier to just power through the fast and skip keto flu and just end up in ketosis. But things like that actually I love doing because it shows my kids that we can do incredibly difficult things. When pandemic
That's so
hit,
important. That's so
yeah, when the
important.
pandemic hit and I was learning about how I can actually enhance my immunity, I discovered Wim Hof's breathing and I discovered autophagy. Autophagy is our body's ability to recycle kind of like weak cells, right? And just like re-energize yourself and heal. So in order to induce autophagy, you got to fast, water only fast for at least 2 to 3 days just to start. So I did a 5-day water fast. The hardest thing I ever did in my life, probably, is a 5-day water fast. But it showed to my son that we can do crazy things, and it's possible. My daughter was a little too young to understand it back then, but my son was like, "How are you still alive? You haven't eaten in 4 days. You haven't eaten anything in 5 days. Only water, not even coffee, no nutrients, no supplements, nothing. Just water for 5 days." And there's a clinic actually in Long Island that helps people stay on in a fasted state for up to 40 days. They do it through IVs, but the they cure cancer, man, through autophagy. There is a website
Mhm.
called Beat Cancer with Chris, I think it's called. This dude helps
Mm,
people starve their cancers, right, through autophagy. And
mm.
if the mainstream medicine would know about it, there's a lot of trillions lost in profits, which is
Um, it's not that they don't know about it, it's that their funding models don't fit. Their funding models and their profit models don't fit the paradigm that it,
right.
I don't
You're
want to go
right. They
down a
know
rabbit
about it.
hole,
They
but
don't. No, no,
yeah,
no. Let's
they
go. We're
know
gonna
about
talk
it.
about. This is why I post this podcast now on X because YouTube took us down because I was having these conversations, and now I'm gonna have these conversations with people because Elon Musk bought Twitter, and now it's X, and now we can speak
Yeah.
freely about topics like why we're vaccinating kids against. Like when my child was born, they told me I could vaccinate him against uh, hepatitis B.
72 vaccines in the last, like, I think Kennedy was talking about this. I saw a stat. It
Ugh,
was like we're doing 72 vaccines and like 30 years ago or 40 years ago, it was like three.
three,
And it's
yeah. And they
like,
don't make any
what?
sense. When I asked the doctor or the nurses,
Yeah.
rather, why should I put hepatitis B vaccine? All they
Yeah.
try to do is guilt trip me into doing it. And they couldn't give me coherent answer because, like, well, he's not having any sex for a while. And they told me needles. Needles. Have you seen a newborn baby? They're wrapped up in blankets. What needles? Like,
He
what
can't even grab
needles?
a fork. What is he doing when he's talking about a needle? What are you
Then they
talking
tell
about?
me, like, well, if you cheat on your wife for the person who has hepatitis B and you have unprotected sex, you catch it and you can give it to your wife. I'm like, so if I'm not cheating on my wife, I don't need to worry about it. It's
Oh
that
no, you
simple
still
to
need to
me.
worry about it. You still need to worry about it. What? Yeah.
Yeah, like, so give me a scenario why I should give that shot to my kid, who, by the way, has aluminum in it that can cross blood brain barrier. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not a doctor, but I can read, right? So there's research available online. I can read for myself and I can self-educate myself. And just, you got to explain to me why I should give it to him in order for me to give it to him. I'm not going to just take your word for it. You know, that was the
Yeah.
biggest kind of. I teach my son. I'm going to make a video soon about core principles of critical thinking. So the very
Mm,
first rule of critical thinking is always to recognize your own bias, because if you don't recognize your own
mm,
bias, you're not thinking critically, right? So the
mhm.
hardest thing for me when it came to Western medicine was to recognize my own bias. I used to trust it blindly, like doctors are good, and then we see what happened with the epidemic
It's not that
of
the doc, it's not a doctors are good. There's a conflation there. Um, yes, ideally doctors are good if we cannot make it about doctors being good or bad, but about the education that they're given being co-opted by financial interests. And so they don't even know where they don't, many of them don't know what they don't know.
There's this documentary that came out recently, Painkiller, on Netflix, about
Mhm.
the epidemic of what's that substance? Oxycontins.
Oxycontin. Oh my God.
You know, and I was
Yeah.
hooked on Oxycontins. I actually hurt my
Oh.
back,
Hmm.
and a friend doctor, I asked her for it. She's like, she prescribed it to me, and she cut me off. But cutting me off was not the problem, not a solution, because I just got it on the street. You know,
Mm.
I got it on the
Hmm.
street, and I was taking them until I realized, like, well, my back should have healed a long time ago. Why am I still feeling backaches? Well, it's because I think my brain was triggering me to get more of it because I was hooked on the heroin. This is synthetic
Mm.
heroin, Oxycontins. And now I've watched this documentary, which is so disturbing, how these people and the Sackler family just knew it and they pushed it for profits, you know. And it's just, and there was a doctor who told this lady, who sales rep coming into his office, like, you're just a glorified drug dealer, you know, with a ponytail, you know, like he knew it. So doctors actually try to fight the system, a lot of them, but a lot of times they can't. Their own financial incentives are wrapped around the fact that they have to prescribe more versus actually natural healing process. Like, let's talk about ayahuasca for a second. The first time I did ayahuasca 2 years ago, it was the most transformational experience I ever felt. You know, you had an experience with ayahuasca, so let's talk a little bit about how it helped. You had a horrific accident. You got T-boned and ended up in the coma, which is, you're the first person I ever met in my like social life like this that actually went through something that traumatic, which obviously
Hmm.
comes with, you know, you talk about it, not me, how horrific that was, overcoming that.
Yeah. Spring break of my senior year of high school, I go back to my high school because I think I left my bassoon there. I'm trying to find it. I've got to go to bassoon practice, bassoon ensemble rehearsal, blah, 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 blah. And music lessons. And like, I leave high school. There's this little access road from my high school to a 4-lane mini highway. Um, Whether I stopped at the red light and treated it like a stop sign and went out into the intersection, or ran the red light, or the other guy ran the red light, they couldn't prove it, and either way, and I didn't remember. But as I pulled out into the intersection, a guy came from the left and plowed through my car, hit it right in the middle, T-bone, um, and my car broke in half. And I was blessed by a couple things, which is number one, that my seatbelt was on. Um, Otherwise, I would have been launched out of the car. Number two, that my passenger window was down. Because I remember as I was coming up to the intersection, it was a nice day. It was cloudy, um, overcast Cincinnati weather, but it was generally a nice day, a little windy. And I yeah, I had the window down and my seatbelt on. So when the guy plowed into my car broke in half, and um, it was windy. The air, and they say I would have been air cared, except it was too windy. And so when the paramedics got to me, they found me draped over the passenger side window, draped through the passenger side window over the door. I was rushed to the ICU. I was a 8 on the Glasgow coma scale, And eights, they told my parents, were the most unpredictable. They could slip south towards 0, which is dead, or slip up towards 15, which is like the mildest concussion. And it was kind of unpredictable. They said I could wake up angry, happy, knowing everything I knew before, knowing nothing I knew before, maybe or maybe not even knowing my family. And I could wake up tomorrow, or I might not wake up for 10 years. They just had no idea, which is like, how do you not have any idea? But so my dad, who is an MD and specializes in chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and has run his own practice in Cincinnati for the last 35 years and has been between Cincinnati and Manhattan for the last 6, basically every week, which is a crazy schedule. He called all the people he knew, and because it's one thing to know the right person, and it's another thing to like be in the right community and be able to ask multiple people who the other right person might be. And he called several people, I guess, and they more than one person said to call this lady named Maria, who was or is a craniosacral massage therapist out of Yellow Springs, Ohio. And she specializes in, so craniosacral is cranium, sacrum, right? So helping to, it works, they're energy workers. And she has done a lot of extra work with, specifically working with the brain, a lot of extra coursework, a lot of extra training, specifically working with the brain. And she came down on day 3 and worked on me. I guess it was like an hour and a half, 2-hour drive. And from where she lives to where the hospital was that I was in. And my mom describes it. There were, several people from high school who were there in the hospital room at the time. And apparently they like connected they held hands and made like a chain of energy. And my mom said there was a big whoosh of energy. There was a big whoosh of energy at one point, and I woke up the next day. Wow. So I woke up the next day. I accident when I was on a Thursday. She worked on me Sunday. I woke up on a Monday, I think it was. And then my first memory isn't until 12 days later on that Saturday. Because like my short-term memory was pretty shot. My long-term memory, so I woke up, when I woke up, I had some high school band friends in the room there at the time. And I made some jokes, some inside jokes, and we all laughed. And apparently I thanked everyone for being there. Which just sounds like, I don't know. And like high school kids, like one of the inside jokes was this penis vagina song that we made up in the back of the band bus going to like marching band competitions. And like we all sang it, and it was really fun. And or I assume it was really fun. I don't remember it. I've just heard about it. And so my first memory isn't until like 12 days later, when I was in this, I was like, whoa, like having also drank a lot through college to help mitigate some of these PTSD symptoms, as I was like learning about stuff that I didn't know, and having these like, there's quantum entanglements between TBI and traumatic brain injury and PTSD. And I didn't know about the PTSD for like 15 years later. But so TBI, traumatic brain injury, and so I had 2 concussions from that car accident, an initial concussion and then a rebound concussion. And the so college was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. The neuropsych doc said it was going to be harder than I thought it was going to be, and I didn't believe them, and I went anyway. And it was harder. And but so like drinking became my own like self-medication, and like if anybody's thinking about doing that, it's not a good idea. It's a terrible idea. And I learned that, over its life experience, right? And So I embraced a lot of alternative healing modalities, like that cranial sacral massage helped a ton. I did early iterations of brainwave biofeedback at the time, which is something that I suggest to everybody who has had a brain injury. There are a couple different kinds of brainwave biofeedback and different ways to approach brainwave biofeedback. And brainwave biofeedback just means helping you see what your brainwaves are doing, helping you feel what your brainwaves are doing, so that you can interact with your brain's behavior without having the sensory apparatus to, because like we can't organically and innately with our analog sensors feel and recognize what our brain is doing. And so if we can take systems and electrodes and run those through a machine, we can have sounds fed back to us to help us understand what our brain is doing. And one program, there's some programs for brainwave biofeedback that do called brainwave entrainment, which basically like targets specific regions of the brain and entrain them to specific frequencies, which is analogous to like working out your muscles.
Yeah.
And there's another kind of brainwave biofeedback that on the other end of the spectrum, that's more of like a yin or a yoga kind of approach, which is this program, a fasting program called Neurooptimal, or Neurooptimal, because there's one O in the middle that shares the word. And it operates with a different philosophy, which is you're listening to like music while you've got electrodes on your head, and there's only two, and it measures your whole brain rather than just specific targeted regions. And when it senses an anomaly wave, like an unhealthy brainwave pattern, it sends a pulse through your earphones, through your earbuds, through whatever your ear things are that you're listening to. It sends an exact equal and opposite sound wave through your earphones that crashes the anomaly brainwave. So your brain learns what not to do. Kind of like, so it learns how to do the healthy thing only because the unhealthy things keep getting interrupted by the brainwave crashing signals that are sent in through your earbuds. And so both programs are helpful in my experience, and do different things because they come from a different philosophy on what to do to help the brain heal itself. Do we heal the brain or do we help the brain heal itself? Two different philosophies. And so 15 years later, right, I'm living in Seattle and I'm like, why do I feel like a hypochondriac? Why can't I hold a job? Why can't I this? Why can't I that? Why is life so hard? And I start to like go like, okay, I'm not gonna like wait for my parents to think it's a good idea, for them to want to solve my problem. I'm not gonna wait for I'm just gonna go like, okay, who's the specialist that I need to go see? And my friends keep telling me that I need to go see an EMDR therapist, or this one friend who works with people who have PTSD said, it sounds like you might really get a lot of value from EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Rehabilitation. I think that's the acronym, but I think that's what they stand for, but EMDR. And there's different ways to do EMDR. I'm not totally familiar with it, but I'm not familiar with all the different ways to do it, but essentially what you're doing is creating a relationship between the two hemispheres of your brain. So they cross-reference with themselves inside your own energy body. And so I only went to one appointment that first time, but this lady in Seattle said, I hear you describing these symptoms and I hear you telling me what your story is. Are you familiar, like, and she showed me a Venn diagram, and she said, she showed me a Venn diagram where one circle had the symptoms of PTSD and the other circle had the symptoms of TBI. And a lot of the TBI symptoms, I had all of it. I had every single one of those things, but the TBI symptoms were much less, which I attributed to which I attributed to the brainwave biofeedback I'd gotten. The PTSD symptoms were all present and all annoying, and more importantly, the symptoms in the middle of the Venn diagram that were both TBI and PTSD were the symptoms that were like the worst, like hypersensitivity, hyperreactivity, like they were the worst. And I went, oh, interesting. Okay, I don't have the money to like see you every week for the next 2 years. So I have some familiarity with, I don't know that I'd call it biohacking, but maybe I'd call it biohacking. I can figure out how to hack this on my own. So I know this is about energy. The reason I have some familiarity with it is because growing up in my dad's house, right? Like growing up in relationship with my father, he said he's been treating chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia since the late 80s. And through the 80s and 90s, fibromyalgia was a made up condition. Like workman's comp said it was made up, and that people were faking it and shut your mouth, get back to work. And they'd be injured and they'd have pain and be symptomatic and need to take off work. And you're like, oh, this has been happening since this car accident I had 10 years ago, and it's still a problem. And like, I can't work, and blah, blah, all these things that we hear. And workman's comp would say, suck it up, get back to work. And then they would go see my dad, and they would get better like pretty quickly. And then they would go back to work and it would be fine. And then 2 years, and then he would bill insurance. And then this happened on a number of occasions. Workman's comp or any of these various insurance companies would like a year or two later, like no joke, they would come back and say, we misclassified this claim. We paid you too much. We're going to take our money back. We're just going to bill it off your future claims that come from this insurance come from clients of ours that have our insurance, and nothing you need to worry about, but we're going to take our $600 back over the next over the next several people we have in our network that come and see you. And he's like, what are you talking about? This is service I provided 2 years ago. I've already claimed taxes on it. Oh my God, what a headache and what a hassle. And he had to keep like extra people on his staff and pay them, full-time wages to like, just to deal with insurance companies. So he made the decision like 15 years ago, maybe it was something like that, to like stop taking insurance, which is a whole other thing. But so 2015, it was right about when I was like, oh, okay, so PTSD. Okay, so it's energy trauma. How can I deal with this? What can I learn about this? And I learned about emotional freedom technique, which is the energy tapping.
Mm-hmm.
And when people ask me about emotional freedom technique, I always tell them, I always relate it to the idea of like the knight going into the castle to slay the dragon and save the princess, right? He always finds that spot where there's a scale missing, where he can like throw his harpoon arrow, right? And the dragon magically dies, and then he's the hero. And I relate it like that because the energy system traps the ego into defense mechanism and self-preservation. And by doing this tapping, you're able to basically like take the air out of the dragon and make it a soft, cuddly teddy bear who's there for your direction rather than having to be a slave to it. And so emotional freedom technique has been really helpful. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube
How did you
that
get to ayahuasca
run you
after all
through.
that?
Yeah.
Where did you do it?
Um,
Here, or you went to Peru for that? I did it here in New York. I didn't have to go anywhere. We have
yeah,
uh um they call it, forgot what they call it, but there's some very good experts and they bring guys from Peru to actually administer it. So I went with an amazing shaman, and it was something for sure. It was something, and it changed my
it's
whole
really,
opinion about psychedelics. I don't even like the word psychedelics because psycho has some kind of negative connotations to it. It should be
I think
something
it's spelled
empowering.
psyche with, I think there's an E there, not an O.
Either way, I think it should be
Psychedelics,
something
but yeah,
positive. There should be positive
yeah.
spin, because I'm actually
Um,
planning to do a ceremony with my son when he's 13, or maybe even younger. I'm going to do a ceremony with him. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's there are all these benefits to psilocybin and ayahuasca, and there's no negative. So why are we waiting? What for? Like there's
hmm.
so much science now on how it impacts the brain in a positive way. You talked about trying to synergize the left and the right part of the brain together.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we know from tests now, when you take psilocybin, both parts of the brain are firing simultaneously. We can see it on the scans. We see the amazing
Hmm.
results of even marijuana. I hate the fact that they didn't study it, because it certainly for some people has a negative aspect to it.
If you throw a monkey in a cage and fill it with marijuana smoke, and the monkey dies, it's the marijuana smoke that killed him.
Just like so much
That's the
nonsense, man.
experiment they did. Like what?
Marijuana
Um,
is actually, if they would study the effects of it, there's so many different types, and there's so many
yeah.
different brains that maybe they should interact with, but so many people could benefit tremendously from it in terms of lowering their PTSD, getting better sleep, or like, let's take CBDs, for instance, how awesome CBDs are for lowering inflammation, getting better sleep, just the natural remedies that, of course, would hinder the pharmaceuticals industry's, ability to earn, and that's why it's all stigmatized. Do you know why and how marijuana became the scapegoat? Do you know that story?
Give me the short version.
So last century there was a dude by the name of William Randolph Hearst, who
I've heard
was
that
a
name.
paper
Yeah.
tycoon, and there was
Mhm.
an article in Popular Mechanics, that the article was titled, you can Google it today, the article was titled "The $1 billion Crop," and they were talking about hemp, because if you use hemp, you can actually create like the stable that it's in, you weight nothing, and way more durable, and it's way superior to paper. So this was the threat to his paper empire. So this dude just bribed half the Congress to make sure they demonize marijuana, and they outlawed it first, and then they said that it impacts and it's for the minorities, and people go crazy. So his whole mission was to save his paper empire, and that's why they demonized marijuana instead of leaning into research of the hemp, which is a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal product, or
I
resource
wonder
rather.
how his business would have been different if he had spent all the money and all the energy and all the resources on demonizing marijuana, and if he had instead, not marijuana, hemp, and he
Right.
had instead embraced hemp and changed his product and made his product better. Like
That's
how
what
much of
yeah,
the
that's what Elon would
yeah,
have
how
done.
much right? How I mean, like how much of every industry, like I'm thinking about the gas industry in modern times, right? Like the gas industry demonized electric cars until Elon came through and like did everything
and
so much
and that
better. And
actually,
then
there
like
was a phenomenal article I read, how every industry gets disrupted because they don't embrace change, because
because
they're
they don't
so
embrace
restricted.
change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because look at
Yeah.
it, look at everything, like look at music industry, like it
I
should
mean,
have
it's
been
that
the
dragon,
music.
right?
Yeah,
The
it should have been the
dragon
music
doesn't the
industry that would embrace streaming, right? But they were so protective. Just look at Blockbuster. Like Netflix shouldn't be around. It should be
Kodak.
Blockbuster.
Kodak.
Kodak, like all of these industries, just so defensive instead of like, all right, change is coming, adapt or die. And they're not. They're just thinking defensively. And
Adapt or
every
die.
industry is
Yeah.
disrupted by an outsider. Simon Sinek, I remember that. Simon Sinek did a phenomenal article about how every industry is disrupted by an outside force, because instead of playing the infinite game, that was his book, The Infinite Game. Instead of playing the infinite game, they're just playing short-term field, and they just defend their existing business model and get disrupted by outsiders instead of disrupting themselves. That was his phenomenal article about that. I think it's part of his book, Infinite Games. I haven't read the book yet, but I will. So that's the same thing with this guy. Instead of embracing hemp and disrupting his own paper industry, he just outlawed it and made sure that it's demonized. Instead of now we're finally leaning into researching it and seeing where the benefits lie and where the pitfalls are, because that's really what it should be about. Like, okay, so certain people should not take it, but certain people could have tremendous benefit. There's now so much research on flow states, and there's this phenomenal book by Stephen Kotler called Stealing Fire and the Rise of Superhuman, how you can literally learn, like Navy SEALs can learn a foreign language in 6 weeks by being in flow states. When you're in the flow state, is like this state of full immersion where you lose sense of time and you're way more empowered through it. But you can actually, the way Stephen Kotler explained it, you can actually kind of like simulate it to being in a flow state. If you just go up on a hike, what happens when you go up on a long hike is your prefrontal cortex shuts down. That's why these amazing athletes who climbers, they go through these ridiculous endeavors, right? Because they actually experience moments of hyperfrontality when the prefrontal cortex shuts down. Then he goes afterwards, if you just drive down that mountain on a mountain bike, so because we need a moment of danger. And then if you smoke a joint afterwards, you will induce state of flow, because smoking marijuana will actually make all parts of your brain fire up at once. So it's just an interesting idea for me. Like, yeah, we got to research this. Can we actually induce states of flow without jumping off a cliff? Because most of these cliff divers, they do it because when they're doing this free jumping, they're actually immediately in a state of flow. And there's so much research needs to be done on this, but because a lot of these substances were stigmatized for so long for a profit-driven purpose, we weren't leaning into it. So now I was talking to a friend of mine, Ian Hart, and I asked him about what does he think of psychedelics for kids? And he goes like, well, I've met, because he is Wim Hof's apostle. So they have a Wim Hof's location down in Costa Rica. And he goes, I've met countless of people in Peru and Costa Rica that were doing ayahuasca since they're like 2 years old. It's part of their culture. They're phenomenally empowered in how they view the world and how empathetic they are and how happy they are, because they don't value these meaningless things. They value being present in a moment, and so I'm definitely going to introduce my son to psychedelics from an early age. We're just trying to debate whether we should wait till he's 13 or why wait. So this is the only debate we have in our
So
house.
I admire the courage.
Oh yeah, we're crazy. We're nuts. I'll tell you right away. We're definitely on the edge of things with my wife. My wife is a yogi. She meditates since I met her every single day. She does yoga, so she did ayahuasca many more times than I did. Every time we got pregnant, she told me about a pregnancy before we went to the test. She goes to ayahuasca the first time when she went, and she comes back is like, I'm pregnant. I'm like, really? How do you know? We weren't even trying. She's like, no, I was doing ayahuasca. I saw this vision of my boy and I'm pregnant with a son. I'm like, have you done a test? No. So she went to the pharmacy, takes a test, comes back, pregnant positive. Only about a month or month and a half later or 2 months later, we actually are able to see the scan that it's a boy. She knew it the first week of pregnancy. There you go. Like, you can't explain these things with the knowledge we have of science today, but she definitely knew, because she came back and told me she's pregnant with a son when science couldn't even define that yet. And she was 100%
I think a lot
positive.
about, that's super cool. I think a lot about, not a lot about, a saying that I like, I think, is that it's just a modern version of 1491 and the world is still flat.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Okay, you're still in 1491. Okay.
Dude, they put Galileo behind house arrest for that. Like, he said,
10 years.
For 10 years. Because he said the earth is round. And now there's still some flat
Well, no, because he said the earth goes around the sun, not that the sun goes around the earth.
They house arrested him for that. Heresy, they called it.
Yeah. Rather than opening to a bigger definition of what God is based on a higher truth, they coalesced around the familiar.
Yeah.
Cannabis, electric cars, like, where else is there's
the science of the
Wow.
brain is so interesting to me. Have you ever heard of the Alvaro Pascal Leon experiment at Harvard?
I've heard that name. I don't remember the
Dude, his
context. Yeah.
experiment blew my mind. He kind of validated scientifically now what we knew for centuries, how powerful visualization is. Because we knew
Mm-hmm.
visualization is powerful through empirical evidence, but never scientific evidence. So what this
Mm-hmm.
dude did is he invited. So the hypothesis was that our visualization changes our brain the same way as action does. Because we know, like, let's say you exercise, right? The part of the brain responsible for that muscle contraction will actually grow some dandelions, or whatever they call it, and will become a little stronger, right, in the process. So he invited 50 musicians. By the way, you're gonna like that because you're a musician. He invited 50 musicians, and they did what they call the transcranial brain simulation test. Like they were scanning their brain, right, to get a picture of their brain prior to that. And I also think they did fMRIs on them. So they did two tests on them prior to it. Then they asked them to play me fast-paced music for 2 hours straight, something they knew really well, 5 days in a row. And then they did the same tests at the end of those 5 days, and they saw that the brain responsible for their fingers moving grew the way they expected it to grow. And then he did the second part of the experiment, which is the amazing part. He invited 50 more musicians and asked them to only visualize the same thing for 2 hours for 5 days straight. They visualized playing the same piece of music, and the brain change was identical to those other 50 guys that actually did the work, which is proved the hypothesis that our brain grows with visualization, that our brain basically can't tell the difference between reality and vivid imagination, right? That they
Yeah.
grows and adapts and malleable in the same way as action changes it, visualization does. So like I apply that to my son every time we go to a hockey tournament. I make him visualize the goals. I make him sit in the car while we're driving, close their eyes and visualize the game. Do all that mind work first because it'll help you actually make it happen on the ice.
Do you talk to him about speed at which it's visualizing? Because
No,
to
actually,
play
no.
it, so this is actually, I can't cite the study and I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but I remember hearing about this particular thing, confirming everything that you're saying, and that if you visualize it at half speed, or you play, or you practice, if you practice your music at like half tempo so that you can get your fingers under it, that only helps you do it at half tempo. That doesn't help you do it at actual real life speed.
Interesting.
So when you're having him visualize it, have him visualize it at real life speed rather than at halftime, unless you're going to have him practice it at halftime to get the technique, and then have him speed it up so that he's doing it at real time. Because the real time visualization, as you said, the real time visualization lines up with the real life practice, but the halftime visualization doesn't line up
Dude,
with
this
real
is why I
life
love doing
practice.
this podcast with people like
Yeah.
you. This is the things we learn and we share what we learn from each other. Like this
Yeah.
is amazing insight. I'm definitely going to adjust that visualization now to
Cool.
the speed and to the real life environment of the game, so that it
Cool.
actually transforms into action. These things
The
that
more
we pick up from each other.
multisensory, the more multisensory you can make it, the more those dendrites will
That's the word, dendrites.
yeah. Um, the more those dendrites will interweave and create a stronger mental fabric of the behavior you're trying to fix.
I love it. Well, let's
Yeah.
talk a little
What
bit
does the
about
ice,
Acton.
what does the ice smell like? What are the
Oh,
sounds that you hear? Like when your skate does that thing? How does your weight shift? What do you, yeah, all those things you get to, yeah,
one
totally.
of the added benefits of skating that I just discovered a few weeks ago, again from Andrew Huberman, is that he talks about neuroplasticity is increasingly enhanced when you're always about to fall off the edge. And when you're skating, you're always on the edges. And that's why like skiing and snowboarding enhance neuroplasticity, because that feeling that you're about to fall off and you control it actually enhances neuroplasticity. So now after a good skating session, he reads or he learns new things because it actually much easier for him to remember it later and to actually retain the knowledge that he gains. One of the tricks that I discovered just recently, even though he's been skating since he's 4 years old. But let's talk a little bit about Acton
I'm
before
imagining ice skating with a book in your hand.
we...
Like,
that might happen one day. That might
um,
happen. Who knows?
yeah. Did you want to talk more about ayahuasca, or did you want to
Yeah,
talk
both,
straight switch over to
whatever.
Acton? Okay.
Let's talk about your experience with
Um,
ayahuasca and then jump onto Acton. How did
okay.
ayahuasca help
So
you overcome PTSD, like in your personal experience, or just whatever
yeah,
benefits you got out of it?
dude, so many.
Hmm.
Um, so the way I got into it was I was in Seattle. I was going to this meditative synagogue that we really miss. It's Seattle Bet Aleph Meditative Synagogue in Seattle. We miss it. We don't live anywhere near there, and we miss it. Um, but we I was talking with an older couple who had had a good amount of success in business and created a pet food franchise, and had like close to 30 locations. And so they were doing just fine, and had a lot of access um, to options, because when you have money, you have options more than you have anything. And the at one point we had this picnic. I'd heard of ayahuasca and I was really fascinated by it, and I had been at that point I was really deep into astrology, trying to learn and try to dive down into it as deeply as I could so that I could actually understand it at a mechanical level and from a scientific level, a scientific approach, um, to understand really how to make it useful in my life. And I was thinking a lot about shadow and dark and light and living in, tying all of consciousness together so that I could live a meaningful, like, and this was when I was in the middle of PTSD and going like, what is darkness? What is light? And I I was at this synagogue get together picnic thing down by Lake Washington. And I started talking to the husband of this older couple who built this pet store empire. And he said, Josh, I've been thinking about doing ayahuasca. I've been really interested in this. Or I can't remember if he said, I'm thinking about doing ayahuasca, or my wife and I went to Peru and I did it once. I can't remember exactly how that happened, but he said what he said about it. But he said, I heard you're into astrology, and I'm really getting more interested in exploring the shadow of life and like the things beyond what you can see. Cause like the visible light spectrum, just a quick aside, like the visible light spectrum is like a narrow band of all light frequencies. The sound spectrum, that the audible spectrum, is like 2000 hertz to 20,000 hertz, plus or minus, right? That doesn't mean that there's not sounds below it and not sounds above it. Like whales speak at a make sounds that are like much lower vibration. Dogs can hear whistles that we can't hear, right? Like birds and things tweet at pitches that we can't really hear. There's all kinds of sounds and all kinds of life outside of what we can recognize in 3D time and space. And just because we don't pick it up with our analog sensors doesn't mean it's not real. Just because 1491, just because we haven't been to the other side of the world doesn't mean that the world is flat. It just means that we don't know about it yet from a major political,
That's such a good
socially
analogy, by the way.
acceptable,
That's such a good analogy.
yeah, right, socially acceptable worldview. And so he was like, he said, so back to that guy, we're walking through the park, walk away from the group, and he said, I'm really interested in the shadow stuff. So you're an astrologer, right? Can you tell me about my astrology? Because I'm getting a lot more interested in this light and dark stuff. And I got diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia recently. And I went, oh man, that's real, huh? And he's like, so you're thinking about life and the meaning of life and death and what the value of the body is to consciousness, and these kinds of entanglements, and these kinds of, not entanglements, but these kinds of like real soul searching deep life questions. And he's like, yeah. And so I went and did ayahuasca. I think he had already done it once. I went down and did ayahuasca. And no, he didn't go down to Peru. He had somebody come up to Seattle and do like a ceremony in his house, because there was somebody in California who does it or something like that. And travels around. And so, or maybe he said he'd gone to California. The details of that aren't all that important. But he said, so I did ayahuasca, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I really want to do that. It's just, I'm not getting myself down to Peru anytime soon. Like I can barely pay rent, like all these things. And he said, so we had a good and deep conversation. And he, about a month later, or maybe 6 weeks later, like maybe 2 months later, a month or two later, he died, and Ira was gone. And apparently, like he had one round of what's that stuff called that they
I
put in
don't
you
know
to
the
help kill
names.
cancer?
Yeah. Oh, to kill cancer?
Yeah, chemotherapy.
Chemo?
Yeah, he did one round of chemo and then was like, nope, and died a week later. And so that was like in August, the end of August, he died. And like a month or two later, I didn't hear about it for a couple of weeks. And then a couple of weeks after that, his wife called me and said, Ira told me, Josh, did you talk to Ira about ayahuasca? And I went, oh no. Yeah, I did. Like, what? I don't know. What did I do? like she was, and she said, okay, yeah, cool. Do you want to do it? Because we're bringing a shaman to our house. And Ira said you were into it and you wanted to try it. So we want to invite you to our ceremony. And that was the first time I did it. And for anybody who's thinking about it, I would offer one bit of advice. Well, I would offer a couple bits of advice. And the first one is ayahuasca is plant medicine. It's the combination of tree bark and a poisonous vine. It's indigenous plant medicine, and it brings I've done it 5 times, and every single time it was different. Right. And the most important, and so you're really getting a relationship with the earth rather than a relationship with science, right? So you're getting a relationship with earth and earth medicine rather, and like bear with me here, archetypal cosmology, right? Rather than something that's going to be prescribed to you. So you have to I'll try to do your best to allow yourself to be open to the flow of things. But most importantly, before you decide that you want to do it, make sure that number one, make sure that there's something that you want to heal, that there's healing that you're looking for. Because if you go into it looking for a trip, you're more likely to have a terrible experience.
Intentionality.
If you look for well, not just intentionality, but specific intentionality. Like right. It's medicine. It's not recreation. It's something to go into with an intent to experience some kind of healing rather than some kind of escape park, right? You're not looking for a skate park. You're looking for something that's kind of like What Dreams May Come, that Robin Williams movie. Like you're looking for something that's going to bring you some healing and bring healing to your ancestors and these kinds of things. And if you come into it with that level of intentionality, rather than I want to go play on a skate park, there's going to be a much greater chance that you have a healing experience rather than a vomitous diarrhea experience. And which I'm happy to say I have not had to experience, because number two, if you say no to if you say no to ayahuasca, if you say no to the plant medicine spirits, Like if it doesn't want to, if the plant medicine wants to show you something and you say, no, it's too scary, that's when the shit and the barf hit the fan, right? So say yes and know that and this is where number 3, set and setting are most important. Not most important, but are also equally important. You need the right kind of space. So set and setting. If you want to know about set and setting, read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. He does a study about psilocybin, I think it is.
Yes.
He doesn't talk specifically about ayahuasca, but he talks about psilocybin, and he talks about the value and the importance of set and setting for creating the container that allows these kinds of experiences to happen in healthy and constructive ways, rather than in...
You muted yourself.
There we go.
Yeah.
Ways that are going to be healthy and constructive rather than ways that are going to be traumatizing and debilitating. So those 3 things I think are really important if you're thinking about doing, looking for an ayahuasca ceremony. Make sure you have something that you want to heal. What was the second one? The third one was set and setting. Oh yeah, say yes to the experience.
Say yes to the experience. I would just say to the setting, to the third part is like, do it with people you know and trust. Good company that did it before. Somebody experienced that can kind of like, be there for you, because I did it with my wife and a good friend of mine. So like throughout the experience, when the first wave came down, me and her like went outside for a walk. She held my hand so I don't get paranoid.
Oh, you did it walking around?
Yeah, we went for a walk afterwards outside of the ceremony room. No, before the second dose. So after the first dose, yeah, because the shaman did 3 doses, I only do 2. And so in between the doses, I just went outside to get some fresh air from the room we were in, and I did it with my wife. It was magical. It was the way we reconnected outside during that moment of the calm down. When the first wave is subsiding and you get a moment of clarity, you just go outside, you can use the bathroom, go outside, get some fresh air, come back and get a second dose. And it was like nothing I've experienced before. And I definitely realized there's so many layers to the consciousness that we have no idea about, just because we're not equipped with the apparatuses. We just don't have that. Like an ant, if the ant doesn't have ears and can hear you, doesn't mean the sounds don't exist.
I love that. If an ant doesn't have ears, does that mean the sound exists or not?
You know what I mean? It's like, that's the same thing. We just don't have the apparatus in our body to actually understand how much more there is to the universe. So ayahuasca definitely introduced me to that. Besides the healing part, because I went there with an intention to heal certain aspects of my own traumatic childhood, that was a part of that.
But you went into it with the intention to heal your traumatic childhood. That's a great example of something, an intention to bring to ayahuasca.
Well, again, my wife did it many times, so she prepped me of how to do it right. She's an experienced ayahuasca. I don't know how to say ayahuasca user. So, I mean, I think psychedelics.
Journeyman. I think you could say journeyman.
Yeah, I think psychedelics is huge for anybody right now in Silicon Valley. Everybody does microdoses because they wouldn't even hire you in certain companies in there unless you actually are familiar with psilocybin, because they understand how thinking outside the box, it helps you so much to be creative. It just empowers. And if you don't abuse it, there's no side effects. It's all good. It's all positive. Taking a little bit.
That's so funny that you use the word abuse it, because like look at how you mentioned the Sackler family earlier. Like whole operation and the addictive cycling that they spun on to the American people with total legality and like state sanction. Like,
when I learned about psilocybin and how to properly microdose, like the guy actually says, what's his name? The other guy, Paul Stamets. So the Stamets protocol.
Yeah, he was on Joe Rogan's episode. He's big into
huge. He showed certain mind-blowing ways that it powers you, but his protocol is 4 days on, 3 days off. So you take 0.1 gram or whatever it is combined with lion's mane. You do that for 4 days and you take 3 days off, because you actually want your brain to go back to homeostasis. and then you do it again. So you have to like know how to do it. Don't abuse it. You use it as actually ways to empower yourself. It's just like anything else, man. If you work out every single day, there's a good chance you're going to hurt yourself if you push yourself to the limit. You got to let your body heal. You have to have that process of healing and restoration before you keep going again. Same thing here, just apply the knowledge we already have to the things that will benefit you and not. But I think it's a lot easier not to get addicted to these things than, like, for instance, alcohol. Because alcohol, what I've learned, I used to be drinking all the time. I used to be not classical alcoholic, but you can almost say that because I would drink every day. So, and then I learned through listening to Huberman on his episode on alcohol, it's actually a depressant. And the reason we get addicted is the only way to get out of the depression is to consume the substance again. And then you feel alive again. And the second you stop, you're getting all this, the side effect of withdrawal. And then the only way to get out of the withdrawal is to just consume it again. And because it's so widely available and also is a huge part of almost every culture, like I come from a Russian Soviet family. To me, it's mind-boggling today that we have a tradition of drinking and toasting to health. You're literally doing the most unhealthiest thing, toasting to health every union.
That's hilarious. That's a
Just think
hilarious
about
juxtaposition between health and poison.
Yes,
health
you're drinking
poison.
poison
We're drinking
to
health with poison.
It is so counterintuitive and so stupid in reality, but that's the culture we grew up in. And every culture embraces alcohol as part of its culture. Today, yesterday, I was at a hockey game. All the dads are drinking beers. I'm on a sober October. I'm not drinking beers. So I'm like a social, like an ostracized person now because I'm sitting there with a glass of water while they're all downing beers, which is pure poison. It's even worse than wine. Beer is the worst type of alcohol because it does a lot of other things to your gut and intestines. So like
God,
it's
Crohn's disease and all that. Oh my
everything.
God.
So like we and look at the pandemic. During the pandemic, they shut down every business because it's non-essential. But guess what? The liquor stores stayed open. Right?
That's essential. Like what? Yeah.
Go ahead, drink yourself to death.
Right.
All right, let's transition to Acton, and we're gonna wrap this up because we've been going on now for an hour and a half.
Dude, I'm having a great time. It's a lot of fun chatting with you.
Time flies when you have a good conversation, right? Which is actually like one of the key ingredients to happy life is good company. We're social beings. Have you ever seen the documentary on apes called onto Netflix? It's called the Empire. Dude.
Ape Empire.
Yeah, the Ape Empire. It's so I made my kids watch it. Well, my dad didn't get it yet, but my son did. So first of all, like we have to understand that 98% of our DNA is identical to the one of chimps. The chimp empire, not apes, sorry, chimps. The chimp empire.
Chimp empire?
Yeah. It's four episodes. It taught me so much about where we come from because chimps are also very hierarchical, and they also will die if there's no other chimp that actually takes care of you, not female male, no, but rather male to male or female to female, because what they do is they pick each other's like all the stuff from the skin, and if you don't do that, you actually it starts hemorrhaging, and you're actually going to get disease. Yeah, so it's very
so you literally need community for survival.
Yes, you have to. The second the chimp gets ostracized from the community, he dies very, very soon because he gets all kinds of disease because it's hygiene, basically. It's their way of doing the hygiene. Nobody's helping you stay hygienic. And then there was one chimp who saved the other chimp from like dying from that by going to him and actually starting doing the hygienist work with him and plucking all the stuff out of his fur and reviving him back to health. So, but the hierarchical notions of that was just, we all have that in our society. It's programmed in our DNA, and we need to embrace and harness it and fight it.
Have you seen, speaking of Netflix, have you seen Ancient Apocalypse by Graham Hancock?
No, but I'm going to. I just know so much about Graham. I've listened to every episode of his on Joe Rogan's. And it's just mind-blowing, the stuff that he talks about.
The one with Randall Carlson?
Yeah, don't forget. He was ostracized for it 10 years ago, made fun of by the scientific community. And now, lo and behold, the proof is in the pudding, right? We actually learned that there was a different civilization. There were civilizations here 18,000 years ago.
The proof is in the earth, really.
Yeah, that's true. It's really in the earth. So the most mind-blowing things to me that he talks about is the pyramids. That thing
it's so cool. It's so cool.
Pyramids is so mind-boggling to me how How they we today with everything we have, the technology, we couldn't do it. We have no idea how they did it. And every theory of
Yeah.
us is grounded in our own understanding of physics and reality, which is everything we know, we still don't know how to do it. So they had a different understanding of physics and how to actually move millions of
The Earth,
stones.
the Earth was arguably tilted on its axis differently, depending on when exactly they made the pyramids, right? I got two more books for you.
Go ahead,
I
man.
got two more books for you. The first one's called The Awakening of the Planetary Mind by Barbara Hand Clow. That is an updated version of a book called Catastrophobia, which is all about this, which is a lot about the stuff that Graham Hancock talks about in Ancient Apocalypse. And the second book is called Alchemy in Nine Dimensions by Carl Kalleman, which is spelled Calleman. And I interviewed Carl Kalleman on my podcast that I haven't done anything with in like several years now, called survivors2thrivers.org.
Love the name.
Survivors, the number two,
Mm-hmm.
thrivers.org. Yeah, the idea was that as I was going through my journey through PTSD and healing it and going like, oh, that's what I'm dealing with. Oh, I think I can do this, and I think I can share it, and I think I can help a lot of people. And that's when the 2016 and election stuff and all this psyops were going on, and I was like, what's real? I can't do this myself right now, and put it on the back burner. But I talked a lot about and this will bring us forward to the education stuff, but I did 20, 25 episodes, I think it was, about I did one with Carl Kalleman, as I mentioned, and I did a which that's such a fascinating book. It's he's a scientist, an archaeology based is his background, and I did some about what's it called, primitive reflexes. Have you heard of
Mm-hmm.
primitive reflexes?
No. Now
Mm.
you're getting me interested. I'm definitely gonna watch the Ancient Apocalypse
Mm.
probably tonight.
This is something. So Ancient Apocalypse is about I think it's 8 episodes. It's super interesting. But primitive reflexes, ooh. Now we're getting into education a little bit and helping to and dipping into what my greater mission is here, and that is raising consciousness.
Which is your Substack.
Which is what my Substack is called. Yeah, raising consciousness. Raising consciousness is both in terms of helping our individual consciousnesses at whatever age spiral upwards towards ascension rather than spiral outwards towards disintegration. And it's about how do we raise young people into adults with agency. And
I love that idea. Adults with agency. So many
yeah,
of them
adults
lack that.
with
So many of
lack
them
it,
lack that
completely
agency.
lack
They've
it.
been
Yeah.
brainwashed into this victim mentality. It's like, outside forces are
Adults
responsible
with
for my lives.
agency. Yeah. So primitive reflexes, you might go back and look and listen to my podcast. I interview a lady named Wendy. So essentially, I'm just writing that down, adults with agency real quick. Essentially, the human organism hasn't changed in tens of thousands of years, right? Like Greeks are the same human beings that we
As
are
us.
today. We
Yeah.
just have technology, and we have 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years of stacked up human growth, and we have the value of time and people's wisdom and experience and effort before us. And so if you're thinking about it from a divine intelligence standpoint, like how do you, from a nature standpoint, how do you create organisms that are self-reproducing, that can survive in any society they're born into, whether they're born into China circa 200 AD, if they're born into Spain circa 1300 AD, or if they're born into the United States circa 2023 AD, right? And there's a series of growth steps that the human organism grows through as it acclimates to its world, learns how to survive and thrive in its world. And isotonic neck reflex is one of those reflexes, is one of those primitive reflexes. The Babinski reflex is one of those reflexes. And if you could Google either of those things, or you could go to my survivors2thrivers.org YouTube channel and see the videos that I posted there about interviewing these people. Wendy Nelson is her name, as I'm thinking back about it.
Interesting.
I also interviewed Carl Kalaman, which might be a good introduction to his book.
I'll go check it out.
It's a lot there. And so fast forward, I'm super interested in education. I'm super interested in, like, I've been teaching music lessons since I was in high school. Like, I moved from Seattle back to my hometown, and I'm not just in my hometown, I'm next door to my parents who still live in the same house that I grew up in. So
cool.
It's, yeah. And yeah, for better or for worse, it's pretty cool.
For you, it's cool as a child to be able to visit.
What's that?
For you, it's really cool as a child to be able to visit, like,
to visit my parents. And well, what's coolest about it is that I get to help. I get to let. It's super easy it's super easy to facilitate a relationship between my kid and his grandparents, and on top of all the other healing stuff that I get to do with my parents and yada yada yada. So I'm substitute teaching in all these different school districts, right? And because, like, my last day in this one school district, it's a 6th grade class, and the kids see me as I'm coming in. There's Mr. Blatman, how's it going? Good to see you. Whose class are you? Who are you subbing for? Who are you subbing for, Mr. Blatman? Like, I don't know. I'll find out here when I walk into the office, and we'll find out. And we all end up going to our various classrooms. I go into the class I'm subbing for, and I put my stuff, I take my folder, like the thing that you get when you're a sub is you get your folder from the office, and that's got the lesson plan in it and the procedures for the various things, the drills and whatever. And I go into the classroom and I sit down at the teacher's desk. Kids are like high-fiving me, which is like the weirdest. The most it's like a little vulnerable, because, like, guys, I'm just a person just like everybody else. Like, you don't love me, you love what I don't make you do. Well, let me say that differently. It's as much as you think you love me, you love the freedom that you experience when I'm here, rather than, so, like, I go to the back of the room, and where the teacher's desk is, and, like, the kids realize that I'm their sub, and they're like, the loud ones are getting excited, and then they they stand up and they give me a round of applause, and I'm like getting a standing ovation from 6th graders just for showing up, and I'm like, oh my God, this is flattering, and I'm like, this is wonderful, but this isn't about me at all. This can't be about me. Like, what is this place for you guys? And I realized in that moment that was going to be my last day at that school district, because they can't let
kids get that excited about a sub.
And the system, if the kids love a substitute teacher so much that they won't do work for their classroom teachers, that's not a problem. The school district doesn't see that as a problem with the school district. It's much easier for the school district to just turn the visibility off for that substitute teacher, so they just get rid of the problem. Why do I have to come up with a solution when I could just solve the problem? Like, huh? And so I realized that was my last day subbing for that school district. And similar kinds of things, whether it was that Adventures of Tintin movie in the other school district, one school district or another, it was like 5 different school districts. And I'm like going like, what is going on? Am I just not supposed to be a teacher? Like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, universe, talk to me, please. And like, I was like flipping around on YouTube, and I see a 6-minute clip of a Tulsi Gabbard podcast interviewing a guy named Matt Boudreau, who I've since become friends with on Twitter, thanks to Twitter. And I learn about, like, I'm listening to this clip and I'm like, everything that he's saying about education is what I believe. And I'm like, that's what learning is. Like, learning versus education, I have this list of distinctions. It's 380 something distinctions long. And like, learning versus education is one of those distinctions. And he's like talking about what his school looks like and how schools should work. And like, if she became president and you became, and I named you as my secretary of education, what would you do differently? What would you do in your first day of office? Or like, what would your ideas be? And he goes, well, I'd change everything.
Yeah.
And it was like brilliant. And I was like, I sent it to my wife, just in this like whole defeated state that I was in at the time. I sent it to my wife, and she's like, who's this Matt Boudreau guy? Like, and I'm like, I don't know, just some podcast. And like, she's like, no, Josh, he's got 3 schools out in California, and it's part of a bigger thing called Acton Academy. And I went, huh? And that was January 31st of this year, was when I first watched that video clip, and I sent it to my wife, and I was like, that whole story happened. And I know it was January 31st because I had to like find the dates of all the videos that I had watched about this. And I found out that I had watched about 20 different podcasts and 20 different videos about this school. Because what I did after I watched that first video with Boudreau was like, I was like, oh my God, are there any of these around here? Because like I said, I moved back to my childhood neighborhood, and I realized, holy shit, I'm going to send my kid to the same school district that I went to. Oh my God, I need something different. This is not going to work. Maybe I'll homeschool. Keeping a steady job has always been hard for me, like blah, 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 baggage. Maybe I'll just homeschool. Hun, what do you think? She's like, yeah, we've talked about this before. Even before we got married, we were talking about the possibility of like homeschooling and what we thought about homeschooling and things like that. And so so that was top of mind. I was like, well, homeschooling's hard. Homeschooling's got its challenges too. Okay. So, okay, Matt Boudreau video with Tulsi Gabbard. Okay, give me another one. Okay, yeah, I'm still in this. Okay, give me another one. Okay, give me another one. Okay, give me another one. And then it was like 20 episodes, 20 videos in. And I'm like, where's one around here? Because that's where I want my kid to go. And there were none around here, none within like 100 miles of here. And the closest one, let me correct, there's no secular ones within 100 miles of here. There's one on the other side of town, 40 miles away, that's a Christian-based Acton, that we're Jewish, and that's so like that didn't really vibe with us. And it was in a church, but they were really nice people, and they answered our questions, and they've been kind. And the next closest one, well, first thing I did was I was like, where's the closest one? That one over on the other side of town isn't called Acton. It's got its own name. And so I Googled like Acton, Ohio, and I found the closest one was in Columbus. So I looked up their website, and I like looked up their, how can I talk to this guy? Like, how do I? And so he was really nice. Answered all our questions, invited us up to come for a open house day to let us see a school and see what everything was. And we went up in March. And I'm plugging away at the paperwork because I'm like, hun, there's none anywhere around here. I'm going to open one of these. This is the only thing that makes sense. Like learner-led, mixed age classrooms, study what you want as deep as you want, rather than study what I tell you only for as long as I tell you, to the limit that I tell you until I arbitrarily decide to give you a test. Like, huh? And so like I learned all about this model, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And I'm like, okay, hun, we're going to do this. And she's like, no, no, we're not. Prove it to me. And I'm like, okay, watch me. And like, we started doing it, and I'm like getting really excited about it. I'm getting more and more excited about it. I get accepted past stage 1. I get accepted past stage 2. I get accepted past stage 3. I find out that there's a couple hundred of these around the country and around the world. And then I find out that there's been 18,000 applicants. And I'm like, oh my God, are we going to get accepted to this? Like, and then we submit stage 4 with this cute little video that we had to submit. And like a week later, we get you've been accepted to start an Acton where you are. And I was like, sweet, let's do this. And I was like, that was the end of the first week of April that we got accepted to start it. And I was like all ready to start it in June. I was like, let's just start it, once school's over, let's just start it in the summer. And I've learned, part of my soul work is learning that just because I understand something and see the value in something and I have a ton of inspiration on something doesn't mean that other people see it. And I have to be patient and allow for the process. I have to work the process and allow the process allow the process to work the magic rather than just my inspiration to work the magic, which is not something I ever learned in the systems education system.
No, they don't teach you anything of value, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, depends on what system of value you're looking for. Because if you're looking for an assembly line,
but just the biggest example of how fundamentally flawed it is like the very least they should do is teach financial literacy. How many kids graduate have no idea how money works, how to invest, what compound interest is. I have adult friends, when I talk to them about compound interest, which Einstein called the 8th wonder of the world, they have no idea about it. And I had to show them this Tony Robbins famous system of like, if you start early versus if you start 20 years ago, putting away the same little tiny amounts, how it compounds over 30 to 40 years. So if you actually started when you're in school, whenever you start making money, it's like a little tiny percentage, sliver of your income, start putting it away and let it compound over the 40 years. In 40 years, you're rich without even trying. It's just, nobody taught me that when I was a kid. I had to teach my own son now how to do it. And again, I'm trying to figure out a way to gamify it with him. So what I did with him is he's making money. So I'm borrowing money from him. And I'm paying him ridiculous interest every month, 10%. And we're tracking it on Excel spreadsheet just to show him how it grows, and it's been a little bit of time. It doesn't show that much yet, but I think in 2-3 years, he will finally start to realize, holy shit, this thing is growing like mushrooms on its own without me doing any work, but financial literacy is the greatest example of showing how flawed the system is, because this is something that should be taught to every single person. Because money is unfortunately part of a world, and we need to know how to apply it properly in order to have, like you said, money is about freedom. It's about choices. After a certain amount of it, life doesn't really improve that much anymore. But you have to hit that certain amount first.
Money's about options. Money's options and choices. Yeah.
But so many people have no idea how money actually works, and it's part of the, design of the school not to introduce such an important topic from an early age. And to me, there's so many more lessons why I love entrepreneurship so much. Because entrepreneurship, I think Hormozy put it best. He said that it's like an obstacle course with constantly changing rules and moving objects. Because it really is. And so what happens in a process,
I like that definition.
Yeah, it's an obstacle course with constantly changing rules and moving objects. So what happens is not only you pick up a really valuable skills, you also build resilience. Because another mentor of mine, Aral Sharfan, calls it like this: if your business is not growing, it's dying. Your business cannot be static. It's either growing or it's moving down, right? So that's the inherent challenge in running a business. You have to keep it growing at all times. So that builds resilience. The second it's not growing, it's dying, and you're having less sales, you're making less money, or your product is being copied and ripped off by somebody else. The challenges never stop, no matter what the business is. So the resilience part becomes kind of ingrained in the process. Second, thinking outside the box, being creative. It's part of the requirement of being a successful entrepreneur. There's no way you're going to be able to be a successful entrepreneur without thinking outside the box, because you have to figure out a problem, then a solution that nobody came up with. I'll give you an example. I have it upstairs, but I'll show it to you later. So during the pandemic, after my son had his first little business, by the way, he came up with that idea, listen to my phone calls. I was talking to one of my clients who runs a flower shop. The flower shops are closed. He came up with the idea, well, we have plenty of flowers growing around our house. Why don't you sell it? So my wife put a post on Facebook local group that was selling lilies of the valley. He literally dug out all the lilies of the valley and sold $293 in 2 weeks worth of lilies of the valley, right? That was his first
Good for
business idea.
him.
The
Yeah,
second business he came up with, thinking outside the box, is at that time during COVID, we didn't know anything about the virus. We also thought that it might be spreading during surfaces, right? We didn't know. It was the very beginning of the pandemic. So he
sure.
thought, well, we want to encourage kids to wash their hands more often. I'm like, yeah. So he came up with the idea of making soaps that have a toe inside. So in order to get to the toe, you got to wash your hands more often. That was a huge hit in our local community, and through when we did the Acton Business Fair for kids, he sold out in one day close to $200 worth of soaps, $5 bars. That's thinking outside the box. Once we learned that it doesn't help the virus, he stopped doing it. But in the beginning, that kind of creative thinking, and kids have that, it's built into them. Schools crush it though.
Crush it. I'm thinking about that thinking outside the box thing. It's not that, and this is the like, help me, maybe you can help me work this out. The idea that you're thinking outside the box to come up with self-evident solutions is it's such a silly thing. It's so silly. Like, thinking outside the box just means that the box is wrong. It's not, the box isn't the foundation that you should be thinking from. So you're thinking from the box of natural cause and effect.
Do you know where that
based on
phrase came from?
reality
Do you
and
know the
motivations.
origins?
Yeah,
Do you know the
I know.
origins?
Well, sure. Where's the origin?
No, back in like 70s or 80s, the management firms in America, they came up with
Yeah.
that test for their employees, right? Where they would draw these 9 dots, and then you have to connect these dots, and everybody would try and struggle. You have to connect it using 3 lines, no more. And they would struggle to connect it inside that imaginary box, because in reality, all you have to do is go outside of that box and you can connect them easily. But their mind, nobody told them to do it inside these 9 dots. Yeah, nobody told them to do this inside 9 dots. Nobody said anything. They just gave them 9 dots, told them connect it using 3 lines. And by default, this product of our schooling system, we're thinking inside of that box. And that's where the phrase came from, think outside the box, because that's the solution to that. Right? But just thinking creatively is innate in kids, and schools just beat it out of them. Crush it with no mercy.
Let's come up with a reframe real quick. So
Sure.
instead of think outside of the box, which is open-ended and an insecurity because you're not thinking of anything specific, you're thinking outside of the comfort zone, which who wants to be uncomfortable? So instead of this idea that I think back to a lot in terms of playing to lose rather than playing to win, let's think about it, reframe this, like think outside of the box and think about it more in terms of think into natural law.
There is a scientific term for that. It's called thinking divergently, which basically means that there's a multiple solutions to any given problem.
Think divergently. I like that too. Yeah.
And the problem with schools today is, as a second order of consequence of multiple choice questions, they create convergent thinking. Kids, as not a direct result of that, but indirect result, second order consequence of taking multiple choice questions, they start thinking that there's one right answer for every problem. Well, we know from real world that any given problem could be solved in multiple different ways. And that's a divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is what I encourage with my kids all the time. Like, all right, give me 3 possible solutions to this problem, at least 3. And as many as you can come up with. All the time I tell them that. There's not a one solution to this problem. There's many. How many can you come up with? Give me them.
You sound like an ideal parent for an Acton Academy
anything
school.
But believe me, I have my minuses like I have my flaws like any human being. But
everybody human being, sure, of course. And to be fair, like I don't have a school yet, so I'm certainly not the spokesman for it. I'm just somebody who's eager to contribute to the solution. Any last questions? I know you've been saying let's wrap it up for like an hour. What loose ends do you feel that you want to make sure that you get answered, or that you want to tap on or tap into before we?
I think it's time to wrap up. The thing is, I would love to do it again and again with you, because especially as you open up your school soon and you have the experience There's going to be so much more insight you'll be able to bring to the table from that experience, man. So I want to do this again with you. We're definitely going to stay in touch now on X, but just finish up by saying where our audience can find you, you know, your
Okay.
Substack, your X channel, your media channels, and we'll finish with that.
Yeah, so I have a few places. Um, I'm on X at Joshua Blatman. It's my name. I'm Joshua Blatman, a bunch of different places. I also have a website called survivors2thrivers.org. I have my Substack is called joshuablatman.substack.com. I publish an astrology journal. We didn't really talk about astrology at all. I
Not
call it an
today,
astrology
no.
digest. We'll talk
Let's
about
do
that next
another
time,
one.
perhaps.
Let's do another
Yeah,
episode on that. But I have to prepare
happy
a little
to.
bit for that because I'll be honest with you, there's very little I know about astrology. So I would
Well,
have to read your
that's
Substack a
a
little bit first.
go ahead and yeah, read it, subscribe.
I did. I subscribed. I read it a little bit.
Oh, cool. We the less you know coming into it, the better, because then
Okay.
it's more relatable to people. I think you'll ask more honest questions, and you'll ask questions that I think more people have. So I think
Sounds
that's a
good.
good. I'd rather
So
you
we'll,
not do a
we'll
bunch of
schedule
homework,
another
to be honest.
podcast in a few weeks and
Yeah,
do an astrology
yeah,
one.
yeah. I think you might really also enjoy interviewing my dad on your podcast.
I'd love to, especially
Um,
about stem cells and everything else he did with you and all the
yeah,
work. I'd love to
yeah.
interview him.
Yeah. The last thing, so my brand, the encapsulating idea is raising consciousness. And I do that through music, astrology, and education, teaching. And my music, which is the one I haven't mentioned, I play guitar and write music and sing songs and stuff. And I'm on Spotify and Apple Music and those places under my name, Joshua Blatman. And I'm on Instagram at Raising Consciousness Project, or Raising Consciousness Band on one and Raising Consciousness Project on the other. So there you go.
I love it. Thank you for your time, Josh. I really appreciate it,
Yeah,
man. Looking forward to collaborating with you more and more.
definitely, Zach. Great chatting with you.
Thanks, brother.
Cheers.